Today the doctor told me Mom has dementia. The sound of my son's voice, which I hadn't heard for 15 years, was so filled with sorrow that I had no room to feel nostalgia. I'm a man in my 70s, a former corporate employee. During my active days, I served as a department head in a well-known company that everyone recognized, and had a decent income and connections. However, the moment I retired, I became a lonely old man ignored by everyone. I divorced my wife 15 years ago. The reason was my infidelity. At that time, when I called at work, I repeatedly played around with women outside, and although I had a family, I pretended to be a smart man who didn't cut corners either at work or in love. It's nothing. In reality, all I did was neglect my wife and son who had been waiting for me to return home. Eventually, my wife had enough and left me. At that time, I had a girlfriend 15 years my junior, and promptly married her after my divorce, considering it a blessing. However, this time, I was cheated on by my second wife. I enjoyed being with you. But I can't take care of an aging man like you any longer. She said and left, and I couldn't blame her. Karma, I merely got paid back for what I did to my ex-wife. I was punished in the most straightforward way. Since then, I have become a twice-divorced single man, and now that I've retired, a lonely old man living alone. I tried to contact my son once, but he didn't want to meet me. I can't blame him. For a sensitive young man in his adolescence, my life was too tarnished to witness. All I have left is to die alone. It was when I was thinking such thoughts that I received a call from my son. Are you asking me to take care of her? I really don't want to ask you. But I'm working in America right now, so it's hard for me to take care of Mom. The irritation in my son's voice stung me. I could see the reluctance to ask me for help in his words. My ex-wife doesn't have any other children, nor does she have any siblings she can rely on. There are limits to government support, and in the end, it was decided that I, a retired man with nothing but time, was the best person for the task. Despite what he said, I was honestly thrilled when I first heard the news. It meant I wouldn't have to live alone any longer. I would be able to return to a life with someone to talk to. There might be a chance to repair my relationship with my son. Such ulterior motives were there. However, such sweet expectations were shattered within a few days. My ex-wife, who doesn't recognize me. My son, who claims to be too busy with work and hardly contacts me. On top of that, my ex-wife has completely lost her mind and can't carry a proper conversation. When I ask, "What do you want to eat today?" she just stares blankly outside and doesn't respond. It feels like I'm continuously talking to myself. Day by day, I was truly understanding what caregiver fatigue, a term I had only heard in the news, meant. My ex-wife would occasionally wander off. At first, I panicked when she suddenly disappeared, but I soon realized that she was just wandering around the neighborhood. So, I started to go out for walks with her. Our destination was different every day. One day we might go to the local park, another day she might just sit blankly in the waiting room of the hospital. On this day, we were sitting side by side on a bench at the nearest train station. Brings back memories. You used to come to the station with an umbrella for me. The house where my ex-wife lived used to be our house. Back when I was in my 30s, working hard as the most successful among my peers, she used to come and pick me up at the station. I was all about work, trying hard to provide a good life for my wife and our then young son. Being lazy by nature, I often went to work without an umbrella, even if the weather forecast predicted rain. At such times, my ex-wife would come to pick me up at the station, with our young son. There was no reaction to my words from my ex-wife as usual. After all, she perceives me as a stranger, so it's common for her to look puzzled when I talk to her. Just when I thought my words were going unnoticed again, my ex-wife suddenly muttered, "He's late again today." After saying that, she slowly got up and started walking home. Could it be? As I stretched out my hand so she wouldn't get lost, my ex-wife looked at me curiously, but she held my hand. As I became more successful, I gradually stopped paying attention to my family. Those must have been hard days for my ex-wife. With her dementia, my ex-wife might be seeing our family as it was when we were close. It's too late to change anything, but I started to wonder if there might be some way to make it up to her a little. On another day, we sat side by side on a bench in the local park. I used to think she was just sitting there, staring into space, but that day, I closely followed her gaze. That's when I noticed she was looking at a little boy, about 6, playing on the playground equipment. Tom was pretty adorable at that age too. Tom is my son's name. Then I got a reply from my ex-wife. I wonder if Tom is on his way back from elementary school now. Then I knew. That day, my ex-wife had time traveled about 40 years back. Isn't he still in after-school club? Isn't he playing football? When I replied like that, my ex-wife looked at me with a surprised face. Oh, you. Are you off from work today? She seemed to understand who I was. I felt like I was about to cry. Yeah, I took a little time off. Well, you've aged a bit, haven't you? A bit is an understatement. I'm a respectable old man well into my 70s, but through her eyes, I might appear as I did when I was about 35. I used to spend my days off at golf business meetings, but when I had some spare time, I would play in the park with my son and wife. Those were happy times. On another day, we sat on a bench outside the library. Have you decided which high school to go to yet? My ex-wife was talking to me with an innocent face. My son, who was about to take his high school entrance exams, often studied in the library. It seems that I now appear to her as my son when he was in his last year of middle school. I'm thinking about going to a public high school. I go along with my ex-wife's story and tell her the name of the high school my son went to. If anyone had heard our conversation, they would have been surprised to hear such an old man talk about taking high school entrance exams. What about private high schools? You once mentioned wanting to go there, didn't you? I hadn't known. My son, Tom, had always told me that he wanted to go to a public high school. I never thought he would want to go to a private high school. Was this when I was overwhelmed with work, without the time to spend on my son and my ex-wife? I seem to remember Emily once asking me to sit down and discuss with our son. On the other hand, I just vaguely nodded. Since then, Emily never brought up the topic of our son's choice of high school. That's around the time when my son started to ignore me. What a foolish story. I simply assumed that Tom was going through a rebellious phase, but it was me who started ignoring my son and ex-wife. I couldn't see anything about my family. Another day, we went to the hospital on a bus. It was a general hospital a bit far away. I remember this hospital. It was the place I was admitted when I broke down at 45. Have you checked in yet? A young nurse approached us as we sat in the waiting room. No, we're not here for a checkup. As I answered, the nurse, with a puzzled look on her face, went back to her duties. A pair of elderly people, sitting in the waiting room doing nothing, might seem strange to others. My ex-wife, Emily, who happened to look at the hospital's shop, addressed me. Tom, wait here, okay? I'll go buy a gift for your dad. She stood up, holding her purse. Today, she seems to believe that I'm our son. Even so. When I was hospitalized, I was involved with my first mistress. I had just been promoted to a section manager and my workload was large. I mistakenly thought I was a special person. On the hospital bed, I was preoccupied with how to prevent my wife and mistress from bumping into each other. I'm back. Here you go, Tom. And the other one is for Dad. After paying at the register at the concession stand, my ex-wife came back into the waiting room with 2 puddings. Like a child, she offers me one of the puddings. Thank you. Oh dear, are you crying? It's okay. The doctor said your dad would be back to his old self in 3 days. This isn't a hallucination. Perhaps this is a conversation she once had with our son. While I was happily having an affair, my ex-wife had been there for me like this. Even though she must have been heartbroken hearing about my hospitalization, she put on a brave face so our son wouldn't worry. And all the while, I wasn't paying any mind to anyone but myself. As the seasons passed, 2 years of taking care of my ex-wife came and went. Our son came back a couple of times a year to see how his mother was doing, but he never made eye contact with me. Everything because of me. I suppose he'd seen his mother dedicate herself to me over the years. Of course, he would hate me. One day, my ex-wife, who was looking out the window, suddenly turned to look at me. "Tom, you mustn't resent your father." I didn't understand at first. But then I noticed that the TV, left on in the background, was showing a news story about a celebrity's infidelity. Probably, the scene of our divorce after my infidelity was exposed flashed through her eyes. "Your father was just tricked by a bad woman. He's such a kind person, he probably couldn't say no." I'm sure the son had been berating me before this conversation. Seeing his mother's sacrifice up close, my betrayal must have been a tremendous shock to him. Yet, here was my ex-wife, defending me. Trying to prevent our son from hating me, the one who had betrayed them both. I couldn't take it anymore. "That's not it. I'm not that great a person." Tears trailed down my wrinkled cheeks. "I'm not the kind of man who deserves to be loved and cared for this much. I'm a pathetic man who, despite having a wife and son, was busy chasing after women outside. Forgive me. I'm truly sorry." Tears streaming down my face, I begged my ex-wife for forgiveness. She returned my look with a puzzled expression. However, her expression changed to surprise in the next moment. "You came back, didn't you?" My ex-wife stared at my face in a slight hurry. I didn't recognize this scene. Where is Emily in her timeline now? As I wondered, she began to smile warmly. "Welcome home." "Yeah, I'm home." This might be the world Emily had wished for. In reality, I didn't try to stop her from leaving back then, and I remarried the woman I had an affair with. Yet, Emily might have been hoping for my return all this time. I realized it too late. I was such a fool. I believed that you'd come back. "Yeah, I'm really sorry for being so late." Tears glimmered in Emily's eyes. "I'm truly sorry. I made her wait for 15 long years. I wonder if it's still not too late. Can we become a couple again?" With her welcoming me home with that smile, I genuinely wished to spend the rest of my life with her. After that, we had many conversations. Emily's mobility had become challenging, and she spent more days lying in her medical bed. As for me, I spent my day knitting with her and taking care of her. I even started having small talks with our son. However, the contents of the conversation were all about the usual ex-wife, and it didn't feel like a parent-child conversation. Our son must be confused about how to interact. One day, we might have a moment where all three of us could share laughter together as a family. Just as I was thinking this, Emily left this world. The 7 years of caring for her weren't all filled with joy. There were times when Emily would suddenly become agitated and angry. But seeing Emily peacefully draw her last breath, as if she was falling asleep, gave me some relief. Her sleeping face looked very peaceful. In the end, I found myself alone again. But I'm not lonely anymore. Because I had those final days filled with lots of conversations with you. Even when you no longer recognized who I was happy just to be with you. Even with you gone, Tom has started contacting me. That's thanks to you. On your anniversary, Tom and I will visit your grave together. I hope to see you smiling again then. Thank you, truly,